students, welcome back. This is Taura's Elbow Bump. How are you? Are you doing okay? Is your family okay? Remember, if you need whatever, just send me an email and I am happy to help in whatever way I can. So lucky you get to hear my voice for another lecture, but the best part is we're going to be learning how to check the assumption of normality using measures of center. Yay! In the last lecture, we looked to see how we can check for normality both visually with figures like a histogram and numerically using statistical output, measures of center, skewness, and kurtosis. Today we're going to put everything together using raw data and start actually writing up a statistical report. As a reminder, we want to check over and over to make sure our data is normal. So we're going to check visually and we're going to check numerically. You can do this in whichever order makes sense to you. I'm going to go ahead and just follow that pattern. Visual verification and then numerical verification. And what we're doing is we're looking for some evidence that this data is normal. So let's start by looking at the distribution visually. So in order to look at the distribution and describe it, we're going to use a histogram. Next chapter, we're going to look at different ways to also verify normality, but for now, we're just going to use the histogram. And we're going to look at certain aspects of the histogram to give us some idea of what the shape of the distribution is. You can check any of these attributes or any of these aspects any way you like. In my example, I'm going to go ahead and check to see if the distribution is symmetrical, if it's skewed, or if it's uniform. Here I have a histogram, and let me get my pointer again. So here's my little pointer. Here I have a histogram. I have the bars, right? And this is called a normal curve overlay. See how it kind of makes it kind of nice? And we can see that right here, it looks like the histogram is following the shape of this curve, more or less. Now, it's never going to be perfect, but more or less, it is following this. We see that there are fewer values off to either side of the tail, and also that the majority of the data is in the center. Okay, so this is looking symmetrical to me. There's not more outliers on one side than the other. It's not shaped like a rectangle, which is uniform. There's a nice distribution. The majority of the data is in the center, and it tapers out on the left side and on the right side for the values that are much smaller and the values that are much larger. We also see that this is a unimodal curve. There is one mound here in the center. It is being created by the mode, which is right here, this tall column. And there doesn't appear to be any outliers, right? We don't see anything that's out here that's a lot smaller. We don't see anything that's out here that's a lot bigger. Everything's pretty much together, okay? We also want to check the data numerically. We want to check three things. You can check these in any order. I'm just going to go ahead and do it this way. I'm going to go ahead and check to see what is the relationship between the mean and the median. If the mean, X bar, is approximately the same as the median, then I have some evidence my data is normal, symmetrical. It's got the shape of the normal curve or the bell curve. If the mean is less than the median, I have some degree of left skewness. It might be a lot, it might be a little, but it does suggest that it's left skewed. If my mean is bigger than my median, then I have some evidence that my data is right skewed. I don't know to what extent. What will tell me what extent the data is skewed is looking at the skewness value. The acceptable range for the skewness value is -1 and +1. So if your skewness value is between +1 and -1, right, then you're going to be okay. So we look at the skewness value on the output. If the skewness is less than -1, then the data is excessively left skewed. Another way to say that is it's excessively negatively skewed. If the skewness is greater than +1, then we can say that the data is excessively right skewed or the data is excessively positively skewed. Either way that you want to state this is fine. They mean the exact same things. What I'm doing is I'm giving you different options so you can find the way that makes sense to you. This is all about it making sense to you, not to me, to you. The other thing we want to check for is the kurtosis value. And the kurtosis value is going to kind of tell us how like squatted down the mode is and how much of the distribution kind of ran into the tails, or how pointed the mode is, that the tails kind of became even thinner because all of the area under the curve was kind of being pushed up to create that really tall mode. The acceptable range for the kurtosis is between -3 and +3. If you have a kurtosis value that is less than -3, then you have a negative kurtosis. It's negatively kurtic. Another way that you can say that is that it is platykurtic. Platy, remember, means flat. The tails have become wider because the mound has, or the mode has kind of flattened out. If you have a kurtosis value that is greater than +3, then you have a positive kurtosis. That means that the tails are very, very thin. There's not a lot of space at the end of the tails. They're very, very thin. The fancy way to say that is that it's leptokurtic, and you are going to have this really tall mound in the center. The tails are not the right width for the curve or the distribution to be considered normal. So let's do an example from start to finish. We're going to start with the professor salary example, and if you look in the description box below, you'll find a Google Sheet link where you can have access to this data. We're going to use StatCrunch to evaluate the normality, and then I'm going to show you how to write your evaluation in a statistical report. So let me go ahead and go into the sample data here, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and go into the doctoral salary information. And I'm going to go ahead and just take all this information, go ahead and cut paste it. So here I highlighted everything. Let me give you just a little tip. You want to highlight the actual columns by clicking on the letters themselves, not trying to pull everything down, because you can make some mistakes. Go ahead and copy it. And then I'm going to go ahead and go into StatCrunch and open up a new sheet. I'm going to go ahead and click at the very top where it says var1 and use Control-V to paste all the information in, and I can kind of play with the size of these if I want to do that. So right here I have some professor salary information, and it just has, you can see that it has the fields that the different professors are in, their ranks, and what they earn. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and use the features of StatCrunch to do the statistical output and the histogram. So let's start with the histogram first. So I'm going to go ahead and go into where it says graph, and then I'm going to go down to where it says histogram. Super easy, and click it. This will give me an easy way to make a histogram. I'm going to go ahead and click salary. I'm going to use this section right here where it says overlay distribution, and I'm going to go ahead and select normal. That's going to give us that nice overlay. I'm going to go ahead and mark the mean and the median. Notice that mean is green. That's how I always remember it, is mean is green because it rhymes, and the median is red. That doesn't rhyme. And I'm going to go ahead and hit compute. And look, it gives me a really nice distribution right here. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do summary statistics. I can go to the very top here where it says stat, and then drop down where it says summary stats, and I'm going to use columns. And I'm going to go ahead and do the summary statistics for salary. That gives me salary because that's the only quantitative variable. If you notice, this first column right here is qualitative data. It tells you what kind, it tells you the quality, the kind of professor or their field of interest. And then it also tells you their rank, whether they're an assistant, associate, or full professor, which is also a qualitative variable. So the summary stats knows automatically that you're looking for a quantitative variable. I'm going to go ahead and click salary so that it will pull it over here on the right in this little box. And then I'm going to pull the measures that I am interested in. And let's just start really simple. I always want to use the sample size, which is n. If you hold down the Control key, or if you have a Mac, you want to hold down the Command key, then I can click many of these. I can add mean. I can scroll down using this little tiny bar right here and select median. I can scroll down and click skewness and kurtosis, and then again hit compute. And now I have two things that work really well for me. I have my summary statistics for the salary, and I also have a histogram that matches it. What I've done here is I've taken the summary statistics from StatCrunch, and you can do that just as easily as just downloading the picture. You can use, if you have some sort of like snipping tool on your computer, you can also take a picture of it that way. And I've also gone ahead and downloaded the figure of the histogram for the same information. So I have this information. I'm going to go ahead and evaluate it. And I'm going to go ahead and evaluate it the same way that I discussed it before, but again, it doesn't matter which way you do it. You just have to make sure that you complete all the different parts. So the first thing I did was I looked at the normal curve right here. And I noticed that it's unimodal. It does have an outlier over here. See how this tail is a little bit longer than the other tail? So I am seeing a little bit of a right skew. It's out here, it's the tail is a little bit longer on the right, so this is a right skew. The mean and the median are approximately in the center. It does have one mode, it's unimodal. Most of the data is right here, and it's got the one out here. Okay. The next thing I want to do is look at the relationship between the mean and the median. The mean is 86,768 approximately, and the median is 82,733. So this is saying that the mean is greater than the median. That makes sense. Here is the green mean, here is the red median. The green is to the right of the median, so that means that the green mean is greater. All right, so that makes sense. I'm looking at some sort of positive skew at this point. I look at my skewness number. My skewness number is positive 1.664633, or I can round it to, let's just say 1.2 or 1.67. Same. Now that number is not within the range that is allowable. The range that is allowable is positive and negative 1, and that is greater than positive 1. So this is saying that, yes, this thing is skewed, and not only is it skewed, it's skewed too much. Let's check the kurtosis. The kurtosis is saying that it's got a 1.69 kurtosis. That is within the acceptable range of -3 and +3. So the kurtosis looks good, but this is really not looking good right here. There's not enough evidence to say that this data is sufficiently normal for it to be used for statistical use. So let's see how I wrote it up. This is a great time for you to go ahead and pause the video, read this for yourself, and then go back and I'll read it with you. So I wrote, professor salary data, n equals 87. Where did that come from? Well, that's how big my sample size is. And if you notice it, it's right here as well. So, professor salary data, n equals 87, was provided by Professor Torres on a Google Sheet to determine if the data was suitable for statistical use. First sentence tells me what the purpose is. Visual and numerical methods were used to determine if there is evidence that the assumption of normality is met. StatCrunch was used to create the histogram and to calculate descriptive statistics. So, except for my little typo there, I'm telling the reader that I am going to look at the data visually and numerically to see if that assumption can be met, and what I'm going to use in order to do the calculations. I'm going to use StatCrunch as my program. I'm going to make a histogram, and I'm going to calculate descriptive statistics for that information. Next paragraph tells me what I see in the histogram. The histogram is unimodal, and the right tail is slightly longer than the left tail. There is an outlier that is much greater than the majority of the data. I'm talking about this outlier out here being much greater than most of the data, which resides right about here. Numerical evaluation of the data confirms the data is positively skewed. Okay, that's another way to say right skewed. This time I decided to say positively skewed. The mean X bar equals 86,768 and 73 cents is greater than the median. 82,733, which suggests a positive skew. This is confirmed by the skewness value of positive 1.67, which exceeds the acceptable range of positive and negative 1. Notice my little positive and negative 1 sign there. The kurtosis, 1.69, which describes how the width of the tails are affected by the height of the mode, is within the acceptable range of positive and negative 3 for normality to be assumed. In summary, the distribution of the data set is excessively skewed and the data is not suitable for statistical use. Okay, so first paragraph tells the reader a summary of what's going to happen and how you're going to do it. Second paragraph is a summary of what I saw visually with the histogram. Third paragraph was a summary of the numerical data and my interpretation of it. And the last little sentence, technically it's a paragraph on its own, is just the decision that I made. Let's do one more example. This time we're going to be looking at data that has been collected on body temperature. Just like before, you'll find a Google Sheet with the sample data linked in the description box below. And we're going to be using StatCrunch again to evaluate the normality. We're going to write up the evaluation in a statistical report. I'm going to follow the same pattern as before so that you can see this is one way that I have developed a system so that I don't miss anything. So I went ahead and opened up my sample data. I'm going to go ahead and select all the columns that I need. Remember, I'm going to click on the letters so that I select everything in the column. Right click to copy, and then I can go into StatCrunch, open it up, click on var1 and use Control V or Command V in order to paste. And I have all my data. Okay, and this is on body temperatures. Okay, so just like before, I'm going to go ahead and start by making my histogram. So I'm going to go over to Graph, scroll down to where it says Histogram. It will automatically pull up the quantitative variable. So here it's going to have body temperature, and it's the only quantitative variable that it has. The other one is a qualitative variable because it's gender. You can't do descriptive statistics or a histogram on qualitative variables. I'm going to go ahead and click body temperature. I like to use the normal distribution, and I like to use the green mean marker and the red median marker, and I'm going to go ahead and hit compute, and boom, here is my histogram. I really like this program because it automatically decides which bin is most appropriate. If you remember when we talked about how the bin width will affect your data, it knows to pick the one that is most appropriate for your data set. The other thing I want to do now is I want to look at my numerical evaluation. So I'm going to go over to where it says Stat, and then I'm going to go ahead and scroll down a little bit to where it says Summary Stats and go to Columns. Just as before, it will only pull up quantitative data. I'm going to go ahead and click Body Temperature, and you'll notice it comes over here and it automatically goes into the little white box over here. Then I'm going to select the descriptive statistics that are meaningful in this instance. I'm going to always click sample size, which is N. I'm going to hold down Control, or again, if you're working with a Mac, you will use Command. Click on Mean, scroll everything down, go down to Median, continue to scroll down by using this little thing on the side, and click on Skewness and Kurtosis. Mode is always a good one to check too, and hit Compute. Now I have both my summary statistics for my numerical evaluation, and I also have a histogram ready to go. Just as before, I've done the same thing for this particular slide. I've gone ahead and made a copy of the statistical output and the histogram, and I went ahead and put them on the slide so we can refer to it. First, let's look at the visual examination of the histogram. So looking at the visual examination of the histogram here, I can see that the mean is just slightly smaller or less than the median. Okay, it's just a little bit to the left. So there might be a slight negative skew, It doesn't look like we have any outliers. We have the center mode here, it's unimodal, and then it tapers off to the tails quite nicely. The one tail does not look slightly longer than the other one at all. Let's see what the numerical calculations tell us. The statistical output is telling us that 130 people had their temperature taken for this data set. Let's look at the comparison of the median and the mean. The mean is slightly less than the median. The mean is 98.2 and the median is 98.3, slightly smaller. So since the mean is to the left of the median, we would suggest a left skew, but it's going to be very slight. Let's see what we get as far as the skewness value. Check it out. It's negative 0.004. It's practically nothing, which makes sense because that's what we're seeing here. Okay, is this within the acceptable range of positive and negative 1? Yes, it is. It's just a little bit less than 0, but it's not less than negative 1, so this is looking good. Let's look at the kurtosis. We want to make sure that the width of the tails is no more or no less than where it is allowable. It says that the kurtosis is 0.78. The allowable range for kurtosis is -3 and +3, and positive 0.78 is within that range. So everything here looks good for statistical analysis. Let's see what we wrote up. So again, this is a great time for you to just pause, read what I wrote, and then I will catch you in a couple seconds to read it together. So let's read this together. Body temperature data, n equals 130, was provided by Professor Torres on a Google Sheet to determine if the data is suitable for statistical use. Visual and numerical methods were used to determine if there is evidence that the assumption of normality is met. StatCrunch was used to create the histogram and to calculate descriptive statistics. Now, if that at all sounds familiar, it should. It's pretty much the exact same thing as I wrote in the first example, except this time I decided to, of course, logically, except this time I changed the name of the data set. We're no longer looking at the professor data, we're looking at body temperature data. I changed the size of the sample because it wasn't the same sample size, right? I have to make this match. In the last one, I had a typo. I fixed the typo for this one. So what am I starting to do? I'm starting to develop almost like a template that I can use on a regular basis. Let's look at the next paragraph. The histogram is unimodal and the tails are approximately equal length. There are no visible outliers. The distribution is approximately bell-shaped and symmetrical. Same thing as I did in the last one, I went ahead and described the histogram. The histogram looked different, so I can't cut paste it completely, but what I can do is carefully go through and see that this paragraph will match this histogram. These two should match. Now I'm going to do the numerical evaluation, and I'm going to make sure that this paragraph matches this statistical output. Numerical evaluation of the data confirms the data is negatively skewed. It is negatively skewed. The mean, 98.2, is slightly less than the median, 98.3, which suggests the data is slightly left skewed. This is confirmed by the negative skewness value, negative 0.004. However, since it does not exceed the acceptable range of positive and negative 1, the distribution can be considered normal. The kurtosis, 0.78, which describes how the width of the tails are affected by the height of the mode, is within the acceptable range of positive and negative 3, needed for normality to be assumed. In summary, there is ample evidence that the data is suitable for statistical use. What did I do? I followed the same pattern as the previous write-up. I had the first paragraph that had the introduction. It had the next paragraph that had the description of the histogram. It had the next paragraph that described the numerical evaluation of the output. And then the very last sentence, which is again technically a paragraph, it tells you if the data can or cannot be used. It's your decision. Today I have something special for you. I have a pro tip. So pro tip, develop a pattern to write your assumption testing. Save it and use it over and over again. Just as easy as just saving it on a Google Doc or saving it on a Word doc or whatever it is that you use to write your papers, save it and use it over and over. Review it from time to time to see if you can make that template better. That way you'll never forget what you've done, what you haven't done, that you've added all the pieces in order to check all the different attributes for assumption testing. So what's the big idea? Today's big idea is, again, that the shape of the distribution can be described visually and numerically. You need to look at figures like a histogram to see if the data is normal, as well as numerical outputs to check to see if the distribution of the data is normal or not normal. It could be skewed, leptokurtic, platykurtic, uniform, whatever. The next big idea is that the distribution must be checked for normality. For this class, we're going to depend on the distribution of the data being normal in order to make inferences about a population. With the tests that we will be conducting in this course, we will not be able to conduct those tests if the data is not normal. So it's really, really important that it's normal. At the same time, we're doing things like reducing error. So that's it for today. With that said, don't forget to check your emails, check Blackboard, do your homework, and subscribe to this channel. Even better, hit that notification bell so you know when there are new videos for this course. Okay? This is your teacher, Taurus, saying stay safe, and I will be waiting to give you a virtual elbow bump in the next video. Ciao!